Okay, I want you to open up fence.tiff. What I want to do is use this fence in front of the city to symbolize the barrier between my main character and his love interest. So my story is that he is an undocumented worker coming to the big city for a boxing match, hopes to make a lot of money in order to take care of his pregnant girlfriend and that they could start a life together. So the fence will represent literally the boundary between countries, but also all the barriers that stand in the way of them having a life together. So I need to be able to see through the fence, and how am I going to do that? With something so complicated as this, with all the chain link, obviously doing a selection with a pen tool is out of the question. So really our next best choice really is to go into channels. So let's open up the channels panel, and I'll drag that out so we can see it. So there's a channel for every color in our document. So we have red, green, and blue. So we have a red channel, a green channel, and a blue channel. Each of these are grayscale representations of that color within the full color image. And then we have our composite RGB color. While working in the layers panel, if you click on the image to make a selection, as I said previously, you'll select the entire layer. It reads pixels. If we were to have a small area with transparency around it, it would select just that area. The point is it selects pixels. If you make a selection using the channels, called pulling a channel mask, you are selecting based on grayscale values. So what I want you to do is look at each one of these individual channels and see which one has the best contrast. So it's obviously, I think it's the blue channel. So in order to be non-destructive and not damage our original image, I'm going to copy the blue channel by dragging it down here to the new channel button. And then I'm going to force the contrast even more by pressing Command L, which brings up our levels. And I'm going to increase the contrast. I want to get the sky as white as possible while still maintaining the chain link fence. If I go too far, then the fence starts to fall apart. And if I don't go far enough, the sky stays dirty. I think this looks pretty good. Something like this. I'll say OK. Now to turn this into a selection, I simply hold down the Command key, click on the thumbnail of my blue channel copy, and that loads a selection based on the grayscale values. Now I can see here that actually the sky is selected and I want the fence selected. So I need to inverse the selection. So I'd go to Select, Inverse, or let's go back and use the Quick Key command, which is Shift Command I. Command Shift I. Now that's inverse the selection. We've talked about inverting a mask, which flips the black and white. This inverses the selection. So now I'm going to click back on my RGB composite channel, and I am going to go into my layers panel and add a solid color fill. I'll make it dramatic just so you can see what's going on. But we now have a solid vector layer which used the selection to create a layer mask. Now let's take this into our final challenge poster. Let's rename this layer fence. And I think compositionally it's going to look better if we flip it horizontal. So Command T, right click, flip horizontal, and then I want to scale it up so that the fence goes across the entire image. Maybe just have a little bit of that other building showing. I think that feels pretty good. I'll hit return and say OK. Now I want to change the color so that it goes with our color scheme. So I can double click on the thumbnail, choose a color from my image. I think I'm probably going with something quite dark. But we can change it at any time. That's one of the cool things about these solid vector layers. I'm also going to move it up a little bit so we can see it a little better. Okay, now we're going to use the desert to create a foreground element. So let's go to desert.tiff. I'm going to take the lasso tool and I'm just going to create kind of a irregular selection around a chunk of the foreground here. I'm going to rename this desert and add a layer mask. Again, I'm going to go into channels in order to make a selection based on grayscale values, and then use that selection to create a solid vector color layer, just the same way as we did with the fence. Let's take a look at the individual channels. I think the red looks the best, so I'm going to copy the red. I'm going to use levels to increase the contrast. Say OK. And then I'm going to command click. And then inverse the selection. Command Shift I. Go back into my RGB, composite channel, and then into my layers panel, and add a solid color. Again, I'll make it strong so we can see it. Turn this one off so I can see what it looks like. Okay. Now we don't want this to be transparent the way it is, so we're going to create another solid layer below this one using the mask selected here. So I'll command click on this. Then I'm going to add another solid layer. Make sure it's below. Something like that. So this layer will actually be the highlight layer, and this will be the shadow layer. So we'll see how that works when we bring it into the other image. So let's select both of these, and we could group them. Name the group desert. Change to our move tool, V, and bring this into our final challenge. Poster. And now let's get it into a color range that looks appropriate. So I'll open up my desert group here, double click the red, and this will be the shadow, so it'll probably have to be something dark. And then this will be our highlight, so it'll match the sky to a certain extent. Something like that. Okay, now I want to have the bottom of this fade off into the background, so I'll add a layer mask to the group. So by adding a layer mask to a group, you can mask everything inside the group at the same time. Choose the gradient tool, linear gradient, foreground transparent, click above the edge. I'm going to hold the shift key to constrain the angle.